Vedi, you can start.
Good afternoon to our respected teachers and hello to my fellow students. We're here to proceed with the lectures of public policy. Today we have Dr. Deni Shahaji with us. She has done her LLB alongside MA, MPhil and PhD in political science from University of Rajasthan, and currently she is an assistant professor at St. Xavier's College, Nevada. Today she will be taking a session on industrial policy. We are pleased to welcome you, ma'am. I would now request you to please commence with today's lecture.
Thank you so much, Vedi. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, ma'am, you are.
Yeah. So good evening, all of you. So today I'll be taking a lecture on industrial policy. All through these certificate courses, I was just hearing some of it, and I see there's so much of, wide coverage of policies that has been done by the eminent lecturers. So just a step ahead to it, I'll be discussing about the industrial policy. Much of it comes under economics also, but as student of political science, you also need to understand some basics of the industrial policies. What are actually the ethics of industrial policy, and so we'll begin with it. As the topic itself, you can see in the screen.
You have to share the screen.
Yes. I was just wondering.
Yes, ma'am.
Give me just 1 second.
Yes, ma'am, it's visible now.
Yeah. Yes. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So as I said, we will be just discussing some major aspects of industrial policy and the basics of the industrial policy. So if you ask me about the topic, I would say it's very important in the sense of, like, if you want to crack UPSC examination, the basics of industrial policy and how these policies are made, and once the policies are made, what are the challenges that the country come across, and what actually the role of government it is. Also, that we will discuss some of the major policies that has been implemented in terms of industries, and then some pros and cons of it. So starting with the basics of it, we begin with the meaning of it. So in the screen you can see that it's written government action to influence the ownership and structure of industry. So when you come to the can I minimize this? Yeah, I hope my screen is entirely visible.
Yes, ma'am, it's visible.
So when you talk about, so when you actually plan for an industrial policy, the government aim is to actually see for the ownership, to whom should it go to, whether it should reside by the government, whether it should go for the private authorities, whether it should be public, and the best benefit they could actually bring out of ownership in terms of development, and also the structure of the industries, whether it is like heavy industries, whether it is like small scale industries, which particular industries they should focus on for the country's development and growth. Okay, and of course the performances, because nowadays you see the lot many things are attached to the industrial policy, especially when it comes to environment and all. Initial days it was not so much in prominence, but now it has taken a priority by many of the governments of the country. Okay, and then of course while they are discussing the planning, they also see for the paying of subsidies, making it so that the industries could develop. And also sometimes they feel like in industries which is lagging behind, they feel like this is promising in terms of giving employment to the public, where the country is lagging if in case. So they provide finance also, and that's how we see, and then they regulate. So this total sentence that you see in the screen speaks of what actually the basic of industrial policy is. Okay, and of course, in addition to it, it also discusses with the procedures, the principles, and the philosophies behind it. So it seems like, industries, we seem to be, it is very practical what it has to do with the philosophy. I would say there is a direct connection between the two, because if government takes any industrial policy, in that sense, it simply follows the philosophy it has. If in case the developmental goals particular government has, if it is like, they want to focus on primary and secondary sector, they want to focus on small scale industries, or they just want to go for privatization, they want to go the communist way, they want to go the capitalist way, or they want to fix on what Indian policy is of socialism. So all that criteria around it is directly connected with the industrial policy. So, it talks about policies, rules and regulations, the incentives, and of course the punishments also, if in case any industry skips the rules and regulations. Especially now we have, I already mentioned this environmental regulations, and there are many more, if in case. So then this is also a part of industrial policy, then tariff policy. So all these are together, sum total of it is industrial policy. So just because I've already given a gist around it, we will very fast talk about the objectives of it. The main objectives of industrial policy of Government of India are to maintain sustained growth in productivity. So I don't need to explain you much, because when we're talking sustained, that speak the entire sentence of it. The word sustain, it has to be gradual. Any growth which is sudden may leave behind some traces which we may have to repent. Okay, even if it is like we are talking about industrial development, even if you go by the agricultural, we had green revolution, and we know, because you might have read also, that green revolution had costed us also a lot in terms of environmental degradation. So it's very easy. So it's like hike in the growth of agricultural productivity, if in case that can cause some kind of environmental degradation that we have to repent. You can very well imagine, if industries are left free, then it would be so difficult. So the government takes care that it has to be gradual, so that there is time for everyone, for the growth has to be gradual, so that everyone gets time to adjust and be a part of that reconstruction. Then, of course, for India, if you talk about gainful employment is another aspect. Then achievement of optimal utilization of human resources. Again, this is something very common for you to understand when we say human resources and development. Talk about India, we have 50% of male and 50% female, in total. If we talk about, only the major portion has been covered by the male counterpart, where females are still lagging. Now they are picking up. And even when you talk about the male counterpart, I would say that even they are not that equipped, because when you talk of industries, something that is attached to it is education, and we find that women are still lagging behind. So there is human resources we need to cover for this. So when they formulate any policy, their prime concern is also that there has to be 100% or optimal utilization of human resource. And also, if in case the resources are not educated, if the human resource is not educated, at least they should have the skill to be employed in industries. Okay, then international competitiveness, irrespective of the fact what are the developmental goals of specific country, we don't go by that. The international norms The international criteria for industrial development is what the Westerners have shown to us, the Western world, and the UNDP report, when it says and when it gives us the criteria of development, that we also adopt, because we have to stand at par with them when it comes to international world. So somewhere, even in some sections of the people, they may not agree to the developmental goals of what the Western criteria gives us, but then we have to come at par with them. Okay, then transform India into major partner and players in the global arena is what I hope this is the basic of the industrial policy that we will do. Next. Okay, so this is a sum total of the timeline of industrial policy reforms, where you will understand that in these certain phases we had brought certain changes in industrial policy evolution. So starting from 1948 to 56, then 77, then 1980, and 1980 to 1990 was a crisis time, where we had, an idea that we are sinking, and this was the time that it required a lot of the attention and recreation of industrial policy that we will discuss that also. And then finally, after 1990, there was a jump in industrial policy. There was different policies in terms of philosophy. We had a change that also we will discuss. Okay, so from 1948 to 56, what we are going to discuss in it is like the focuses had been, the drawbacks that we had to actually cover. We tried to was red tapeism in public sector was there. That was 1948 when we started off. This was a major drawback. When any private sector had to open up an industry, this was a major drawback. It was not easy for them to fight the red tapeism that had existed in bureaucracy. So that had been a challenge, and that had to be covered later on. We'll see in all these things, just as we are discussing the challenges, we had tried to cover up all these in from 1990 to 1991. In, I would say, the time span of the change, the degree of changes that we had in 1991 was immense, and we tried to actually cover all these areas. Then we had, in the initial years, progress of private sector was not possible because a lot of restrictions was there from the government itself, and the ideology of socialism was very much in prominence, which actually restricted, I would say, the private sector a lot. And then we wanted a gradual and development of all, and there was a shift of socialism towards the communist ideology, I would say, because at that time communism was thought to be quite democratic, and that's the basic hardline of it has been, like development of all. So socialism came very naturally to it, so we had a shift then. And capitalism, of course, was understood to be it would actually concentrate the wealth in one particular section, the rich section, and probably the idea of socialism, the ideals of socialism will not be able to attain, was the idea. Okay, then we'll later see that how the change has been brought. And coordination between the government and the public sector, it was a problem. Then from 56 to 77, the challenge that has come across was that private sector pushed to backdrop again, because again, I would say that time, the idea of capitalism was not so accepted at that level, while the Western countries already had it, specifically USA and all, and they were and we didn't appreciate it much, that particular philosophy. Okay, it hampered then private entrepreneurs who wanted to make big in industry. Then private sector took benefit of loopholes and they tried to bring in, when you don't get that acceptance, then you try to take a different way to enter. So that's where we see, just as they were trying to push private sector, they were trying to make their way into it by hook or by crook. So we see certain loopholes, and then they try to enter. Then state was again overburdened. So all these were the drawbacks of it. Then it was tried to to be covered in 1977, where as such there was no radical changes in foreign collaborations, because it was a big no-no for all the foreign collaborators. And if in case there were any, there were so many restrictions to them that there was they were reluctant to invest in India, because we had apprehensions about, if they come to India, our small scale industries and would actually suffer. Not only that, it would actually imbalance the economic sectors of primary and secondary sectors would suffer. Then they failed to limit production of articles, because when they were there was no competition as such. So in terms of production, it would be said that there was not so much satisfying. And every time when the government also had laid certain restrictions over them, so that they could control. Then 80 to 90 was a phase where we were on a decline state. The economy was in decline state. Initially it was realized, but then how to take a leap was a thought. I know with different governments changing, that also becomes a real problem, because at a political level, if the government changes, by the time this is a drawback, I don't know whether to take it as a drawback, because when you talk of democracy, by the time the government understands for 5 years that these reforms have to be done, time comes, then elections are conducted and the government comes down, then the new government takes over. So this has been a drawback. But then to talk about, there was in terms of industrial policy, closure of district industries were there, then the rate of GDP went down. It was a challenge. We were already burdened with loans. Then denying of availability of funds were also there, because government was under debt. It was a time when the government, the representatives, they went to UN asking for loan, and by the time they were asking for loan, the government came down in India, and there was elections, and then the UN people there were asking that which government do you represent, was a time. So this was quite a difficult time. And then infrastructure industries were also affected. So this was a phase from 1980 to 1980 where India was asking for a reform. The industries were asking for a reform. The economy was asking for a reform. And a big leap has to be taken. But then we made it in 1991. And from 1990 to talk about to 1991, this particular phase, we would say that still, despite the fact that we understood everything, we still failed to promote small scale industries. Okay, then just a minute. Okay, so since I had already made created a picture of the industrial policies that had been there since 1948. We'll just check the very first thing and the major, because we cannot go very deep into it, because but then you will understand with this what actually it was. So it talks that it defined the broad contours of policy, delineating the role of state in industrial development, because the government, the central government, wanted to take over the control over it. So it was not surprising for us, both as entrepreneur and authority. And it made clear that India is going to have a mixed economic model. And it classified industries into 4 broad areas. So it was mixed economy, where, to a certain extent, we are going to give, to the public sectors. But wherever there is the capital, the major capitals are involved, government would come, the central government would come and take over, and to see that, there is status quo in terms of the distribution of the capital in the country. So there has to be to actualize socialism as a so we had to adopt mixed economic model. Then what has been the strategic industries in public industries? We'll see the three industries in which central government had monopoly. These included, arms and ammunitions. There were atomic energy and rail transport. And the basic key industries that come under public and private sector both was 6 industries. That was coal, iron and steel, then aircraft and manufacturing and aircraft manufacturing, then shipbuilding, manufacture of telephone, telegraph, wireless apparatus, and mineral oil were designated as a key industries or a basic industry. So here we see in 1948, when you all started off, things were like that, and there was the major control was that of a central government. Then some more important industries which were controlled by private sector. Okay, so initially we saw public sector, then we saw public and private sector together. Now we see the private sector specifically, and it included 18 industries, where the chemicals, heavy chemicals, sugar, cotton textiles, woolen industries, cement, paper, salt, machine, then for the short machine tools, then fertilizers, rubber, air, sea transport, motor, tractors. It's all written in the screen. You can check out. These industries were picked up for the private sector. Okay, so I hope you can easily access that these industries may not take so much hike as the coal or the steel industries or the heavy industries. The heavy industries were completely under the central government, and these industry, they continue to remain under private sector. In consultation with the state government, had general control over them. So this was it, that state government was kept little to a lower, and then central government has the entire check over these. Then other industries, that was private and cooperative. And okay, so that's then the industries, the Development and Regulation Act was passed in 1951 to implement the industrial policy resolution that they wanted to change. And 1951, they see that these changes are brought about because we have already discussed that there was some problems with 1948 industrial policy, so that has to be meted out. So they brought that. And then, industrial policy statement of 1956 came, taking in consideration the 1948 drawbacks and the criticism. The government tried to bring about certain changes. I would like to add here that, it has been lagging, whether you talk about 48 policy of 1948 or 1956, till 1919, I would say there was no major, that can be highlighted and saying that there has been a lot of industrial development. If you compare it with China, China is the hub of manufacturing, indigenous manufacturing setup that they had, and we actually lag a lot behind. And if you think about the causes of it, I would just say that the government has not been serious enough. Serious, I don't think it would be a right word, but they have not been conscious enough to bring that in. Also, that even the bureaucracy had a lot of lag behind. So all till 1991, I would say there was not much development in terms of industries. All these the policies that were made, every time the criticism was made, they would just superficially try to root it out. The problems remained there, and this went on. Then despite the fact in 1956 the policy that was made was it is regarded as economic constitution of India, or you can say the term given is the Bible of state capitalism. And what specific about the 1956 policy, it emphasized the need to expand the public sector, to build up a large and growing cooperative sector, to encourage the separation of ownership and management in private industry, and above all, prevent the rise of private monopolies. So here again, we see that, the labor section, or, they were given lot of importance, and it was seen that, the large industries, or, privatization, or the private enterprises are screwed, or bracketized, so that they don't go beyond a certain limit. And the idea behind is what, equitable distribution of wealth, I would say. So it provided the basic framework for the government policy in regard to industries till. So that's how we see 1956. That is the reason why it is called Economic Constitution of India, that it was continued till June 1991. Okay, and then we see this 1956 policy. In this, the industries were then divided into three categories. The IPR, Indian Industrial Policy Resolution of 1956. So they characterize the industries into three categories. Schedule A, I'm not just reading it out, you can just see it is in all the industries. Schedule A talks about 17 industries, and was exclusive responsibility of the state to deal with those industries, which include, you can see, arms and ammunitions, and the atomic energy, the railways, then the air transports. Okay, then Schedule B consists of 12 industries. It was open to both private and public sectors. Such industries were progressively state owned. Then out of these two, then there was a third category also, and these industries not included, the two schedule constituted, and this third category was left open for the private sector. And the state reserved the right to undertake any type of industrial production in this category. So IPR, Industry Policy Resolution of 1956, stressed on the importance of cottage and small industries, again, because in the previous slide you have already seen and explained that, there was some kind of, bracketization of the large scale industries and the private industries, private ownership. Then importance of cottage and small scale industries for expanding employment opportunities and for wider decentralization of economic power and activity. So we'll see that in 1956 continued till 1991, till we had that major change in the policy where we shifted to liberalization. This continued for a longer run, and here we see, the philosophy behind was that the capital concentration of capital should not be there. It is to be equally distributed. Also, the challenges that we were facing at that time was that of unemployment, and so that has to be meted out. And if in case the privatization or the private sector is given a lot of importance, they felt like it would subdue the labor rights, and the concentration of wealth will be with them. So it was quite obvious that government had taken these policies, right? All right. So then another aspect, the resolution is also called efforts to maintain industrial peace. And in that, we see that there was a fair share of the proceeds of production was to be given to the toiling mass. Again, that same idea is coming back and forth again. The toiling mass in keeping the objectives of democratic socialism. So that is the idea behind, screwing this private sector to avoid the monopoly of the private sector, that democratic socialism should be maintained in the country. Then one major criticism that comes in the industrial policy resolution of 1956 is that the private sector in this reduced the scope of the expansion. Okay, so it reduced the scope of the expansion of private sector, and that was the major criticism. Now we can do, of course, those times it was felt like, yeah, this is the right way, because otherwise private sector would, since they're already money people and they have the capital concentration, probably they may subdue the rights of the others. So it was, during those days, it was felt like that this has to be checked. Then that is the reason even their licenses were kept under control. It was not easy to issue licenses for the private sector. So it was completely under the control of the central government. And also bureaucracy also played a part, where they tried to because red tapism, I already mentioned, it continued, and then these licenses, they tried to actually find out some loopholes to get these licenses, a reference that I've already made when we were doing with the previous slide. Okay, now this aspect again is, as I have already mentioned, is in order to open new industries or to expand production, obtaining a license with the government was a prerequisite. Okay, then the new industries, if you want to open in backward areas, it was through easy licensing and subsidization of a critical inputs like electricity and water, and this was done to counter regional disparities that already existed in the country. Okay, and it was issued only if the government was convinced that the economy required more of the goods, unless the licenses was not issued. So I already told you the licenses were totally under the control of the central government, and then we see a major change in industrial policy statement 1977. Janata government announced its new industrial policy through a statement in the parliament. Okay, and what were the major criteria of it? There was promotion of cottage and small industries. Small sector were classified again then into three groups: cottage, household, tiny, and small scale industries. So classification, of course, had little variation. Then different areas of large scale industries like basic industries, capital good industries, high technology industries, and other industries outside the list of reserved items for the small scale sector. So this was the highlighted part of 1977 industrial policy. And one other aspect of it, that it wanted to reduce the occurrence of the labor unrest, and it was more of a labor friendly, I would say, and it encouraged the workers' participation in the management right from the to the lower floor to the board level, so that the labor class had more of a say in the management also. And the major criticism, I would say, for 1977 was that there was absence of effective measures to curb dominant positions of large scale units. Okay, and the policy did not envisage any socio-economic transformation of the economy. I would say a little change that was brought about was only 1956, and then a few change here and there, and then the policies were again made, where you say there was no major change to be marked. All right, then yes, the industrial policy of 1980. sought to promote the concept of economic federation and to raise the efficiency of public sector to a reverse trend of production of the past 3 years and reaffirm the faith in monopolies and restrictive trade practices was there, that was known as MRTP Act, and the foreign exchange regulation was also there. Again, the foreign exchange regulation against, it is restricting the foreign investment. Also the new industrial policy again that came in 1991. So we see there was till 1980 it all started off, because it is not that when we say this was the problem, so it is like one day this policy would change. The process goes on. Okay, so even when there is a decline of any industry, industrial development is declined, these policies are declining, it is not coming up to the mark, it is like, it goes on, it is not just one day. So all these has been already notified, it was in the mind to change, and we were declining in terms of economy and we were overburdened. So the long awaited liberalized industrial policy was announced by Government of India in 1991, and there was a lot of criticism, there was a lot of economic instability in the country, and the opposition was there, against the governmental policies, and then the challenge was that we need to bring efficiency, and there was a dire need to accelerate economic growth. Okay, so since we have come to slide 9, I put till 1980, I hope things are clear. I would like to share which had when I was going through, this was something that had attracted me, and I want this for you all, that you see there. See this, just give me 1 second. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, ma'am. We can see the screen.
Yeah. So I will just start with it. Yeah.
Forex reserves for just 3 weeks of imports. External debt, 23% of GDP. Economy.
Yeah. As it goes on, I want you all to focus in, this is just 5 minutes video. It will just tell you, the seriousness of those time, and how we were struggling to get over all these years, the policies, what we had what we had in India was actually stumbling down, and then we had to make a change. So you listen to that, what were the challenges, and how in these 4-5 months we tried to pick up.
On the brink of a collapse. 1991 was a landmark year for India, with economic reforms changing the way we live, work, and spend money. But the story of how we got here is no less thrilling than a Bollywood blockbuster. Here's how it all unfolded. Chapter 1. Sir, who are you representing? March 1991. Growing fiscal imbalances over 1980s. A combo of the license permit Raj and spiraling oil prices during the Gulf War means India is facing its worst economic crisis since independence. This is how bad things were back then. Foreign exchange reserves were at 2,500 crores only for just 3 weeks of imports. To compare, in 2019, India's forex reserves are over rupees 30 lakh crore. Sovereign credit rating was downgraded. Debt was unbelievably high. External debt was 23% and internal public debt was 55% of the GDP. To tackle the crisis, Finance Ministry and RBI officials reached the International Monetary Fund offices in Washington, D.C., asking for a loan. While they are negotiating, news from India arrives. Rajiv Gandhi had withdrawn support to the Chandrasekhar government. On hearing the news, the IMF official asks, "Sir, whose government are you representing?" With no reforms or budget or even a stable government in sight, the 1991 Lok Sabha elections are called. Chapter 2. Suddenly, there was an explosion. 21st May 1991. Shri Perumbudur, Chennai, 10 p.m. Former Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi is campaigning for the general elections. Suddenly, an explosion fills the air. Rajiv Gandhi, a front-runner for the upcoming general elections, is assassinated by a suicide bomber affiliated to LTTE. Now, along with an economic crisis, India faces a political one too. Chapter 3. A new Prime Minister and an unfinished lunch. 20th June 1991. Prime Minister's residence, 5 p.m. India has a new Prime Minister, PV Narasimha Rao. But there's no time for celebration. India's economy is on a ventilator. Narasimha Rao meets Cabinet Secretary Naresh Chandra. The new Prime Minister asks, is the economic situation that bad? No, sir, it's much worse, is Naresh Chandra's reply. 21st June 1991, Manmohan Singh's residence. Former RBI Governor and Finance Secretary Manmohan Singh is expecting friends over for lunch. At the last minute, his friends receive a phone call. Something has come up, they're told, and the lunch is postponed. Later in the day, Singh's friends receive a surprise. Their friend, the mild-mannered economist, is now India's finance minister. 25th June 1991. Manmohan Singh holds his first press conference as the new finance minister and talks about the government's next steps on economic policy. The battle to save India's economy is on. Chapter 4. A month which changed India. In July 1991, the government goes in firefighting mode, taking a bunch of steps to strengthen India's economy. Step 1. Devalue the Indian rupee. But the crisis is so severe, it's done in 2 rounds. First by 9% and then by 11%. Then, Minister of State for Commerce P. Chidambaram announces the new trade policy. Under this policy, quotas are removed and exports are made easier. 4th July to 18th July 1991. 47 tons of gold is transported to Bank of England. This allows India to borrow about $400 million. 24th July 1991. In the morning, PJ Kurian, the Minister of State for Industry, announces the new industrial policy. Under the policy, industries reserved for public sector are reduced from 17 to only 8. India's License Raj era is officially over. At 5 o'clock the same day, Manmohan Singh presents the Union Budget. During his speech, India changes. Fiscal deficit is curbed, FDI is welcomed, domestic market is free. Manmohan Singh ends his speech by saying, Victor Hugo once said, "No power on earth can stop an idea whose time has come." I suggest to this august house that the emergence of India as a major economic power in the world happens to be one such idea. Let the whole world hear it loud and clear. India is now awake. We shall prevail. We shall overcome.
Okay, just a second. Yeah. So I hope you have seen this video. So talking about the last sentence, what the person said is like India would overcome. Okay. So since 1991 till date to 1921, which also we will be discussing later. Just a random question that comes to mind. Do you think that we have come a long way? First thing, in terms of industrial development, we had a hike. Okay. Second is what actually was expected that we would come to this level. Have we come to our expectations? Second one. So these are two things that we are going to see when we deal with the 1991 policy. Okay. So I'm sharing my screen again to continue with the thought that person has left. Second. Just a minute.
Yes, ma'am, it's visible now.
Yeah. So we had come, slide 9. Okay. Now we come to what has been the features of new industrial policy. The first was the de-reservation of public sector. Okay. So when you say de-reservation of public sector, it was like, the public sectors were given a lot of importance, but privatization was, put aside, thinking that it would imbalance the equitable distribution of wealth. And since we already focused on the democratic socialism, so the aim of the government since 1948 till 1919, I would say the focus had been towards the public sector. And then, private sector, anyhow, they were struggling out, despite the fact, students, that you need to understand, despite the fact that the GDP growth has, for us, the tertiary sector has not contributed towards the, GDP growth of a country. But then the basic fact remains that the majority of the population are still involved in the primary and secondary sector is, I would say, a challenge for us. If I can use that word, challenge, or I would say this has been, something that of our concern, that understanding the fact that the tertiary sector would bring us more growth, we had to focus on primary and secondary sector, curbing that the private sector may not take the toll of on the secondary and the small scale industries. So we have to equally see to all this. So this has been a challenge, while when you see to the Western countries, they don't have these challenges. Okay, so keeping the balance, we had to continue. So 1948, I would not criticize in that sense, but 1948 to 1990, things were going on those grounds. But the 1992 had actually brought India to somewhere when we need to do certain changes, and we were forced to take that. I would say that we were forced to take it. But anyhow, after, with lot of there was fear also, and whether we'll be able to overcome all this. So we started with this, like, de-reservation of public sectors, and the sectors were earlier exclusive reserved for, it was then reduced, and the preeminent place of public sector in 5 core areas like arms and ammunitions, atomic energy, mineral oil, rate, everything, though these continued as the same. But then presently, if you talk about, only 2 sectors, that is atomic energy and railway operations, are reserved exclusively for public sector. Okay, so we have this, as it's not that when you say de-reservation, when you say the public sectors have not been given that much importance, it was completely off. No, only the private sectors are there. We have, but then major portion, the major shift we can see is towards the privatization. Then we have de-licensing, which has been already mentioned, that abolition of industrial licensing for all projects except for the shortlist industries was considered. And there are only 4 industries at present, if we talk about related to security, strategic and environmental concerns, where an industrial license is currently required. Okay, and then we come to, like, electronic, aerospace and defense equipment. So these, when we talk about 4 industries, the 4 industries that we talk about is electronic, aerospace and defense equipment, the specified hazardous chemicals industries, then industrial explosive were again, part of it. And then finally, the cigars and cigarettes of tobacco and manufactured tobacco substitutes, all these were, and these four industries were there, which were of environmental concern. So that was a part of the 1991 industrial policy. Then we see that this investment of public sector was there. And as you see, that government stakes in public sector enterprises were also reduced to enhance the efficiency and competitiveness. They were left free. They have to now compete with the other industries, and that's how we see since 1991. This competitiveness and this has actually give impetus to our industries, and also the liberalization of the foreign investment was also done, wherein you see the foreign companies were allowed to have majority stake in India. And in that sense, we see that 47 high priority industries, up to 50%, there was foreign direct investment was allowed. So we see that the economy was open up for the foreign investors. The large scale industries were, there were many industries where the government had a complete control, were had released some control, so that there is foreign investment into it, and we get a hike in industrial development. And also for export trading houses, the foreign direct investment went up to 74%. So this was, I would say, a big change for India. I remember then the opposition party went on saying that when we were going for a liberalization policy, I remember that they said that it would be like another East Indian company coming up in India, and they would they would rule over us, and this would go on. So there was a lot of dharnas were there were objections related to it. But then finally, I would see, since 1991 we have indeed come a long way, but I don't know whether to say that we have come or we have reached to a desired state. Still the journey is on, but then this changes had actually done good for India. Today there are numerous sectors in economy where government allows 100% foreign direct investment. Foreign technology agreement is also there. The automatic, what is this foreign technology agreement? Automatic approvals of technology related agreements, where initially they had to look on to the government for the approvals, and they went under scrutiny, and government had a lot of control. Here we see that these things were eased out, and the MRTP Act, that is monopolies and restrictive trade practices, were amended to remove the threshold limits of assets in respect of MRTP companies, where they were asked that they cannot go beyond 100 crores in terms of investment. It was now opened up, and this MRTP Act was replaced by the Competition Act of 2002, so that the privatization could the private sector could be given a boost, so that we come at par with the Western countries, and also we are able to hold the economic the decline that we were having. So this gave a boost to our economy. Then we now we will see the outcomes of the new industrial policies. Okay, so what specific outcomes had been there in new industrial policy? In 1991 policy that was made, that license, okay, the permit and the quota raj, a thing had become a thing of the past, where they stopped to take the license, I told you. So this is also related, you have to take license and get it approved by the government, and government is little reluctant in doing it. It will go through all that before it approves your project. So they used to find out. So you see, they used to find out, the private authorities used to find out certain ways so that they can get these license, and there the red tapeism came. So once they disapprove of everything and they undo with they had with the license, and much of the problems associated with giving boost to the private sector came to a rest. Okay, then the attempts were made to liberalize the economy by removing bureaucratic hurdles in industrial growth. So I would say the more of freedom was given to the private sectors, so that they can enter, they could experiment, and they could compete with each other, so that this could give a boost to our economy. Then of course the policy also provided easier entry of multinational companies, the privatization, the removal of the asset limit that I had already talked about on MRTP companies, and the licensing was more in terms of it was a liberal licensing. Okay, so one other aspect I wanted to talk was initially when it all started in 1991, I already told you there was so much of apprehensions by the public and the government themselves, because we are going for a change, and I would say it was kind of an experiment for us also, and there was a fear that the Indian industries may not come parallel with the foreign companies, and they may suffer. And I would tell you, there were so many cases in real that the people had lost there, and but there are many other cases, those who had they had taken a plunge, and they tried to come up fighting it. So I would say it was initially it was a government was also like very, I would say, defensive. So when multinational companies came, there was a lot of rules and regulation the government imposed on these companies, so that it is not sudden, it is gradual, and there were more of labor laws protecting the interest of the laborers. Gradually, as we got into the stream and we started flowing with the current, that you see that people also got adjusted with the foreign companies. And then gradually, since we wanted more of foreign investment, and we have already tasted that this investment foreign investment is doing good to us, these MNC companies is actually giving a boost to our economy, that we started lessening the labor laws, and then we started giving more liberal rights to the MNC companies. Today, I would say all these years, I would say, has been has done it has been very positive. But yeah, of course, the expectations are always there. So as we move on from when we do with the 2021 policy and what specific we focus on, we'll get to know that we have come a long way, and we have to go a long way, like that. Okay, so all these resulted in the increase of competition. So I think it's very basic of industry policy that you need to understand, especially when it comes to economic policy of India. So it resulted in increased competition, and I told you, in competition, many had sailed through, many had submerged into that led to lower prices in many goods, such as the electronic prices. And I remember one of which you might have also come across in your books, that when this technology MNC company came with the technologies, certain Indian technologies were actually outdated in that way. So we see that the Indian industries in terms of technology could not do better. So these industries suffered a real setback. But then these companies, MNC companies gave and they brought new technology also with them, and the people, those who were struggling, they incorporated them and gave them the technology and made them a partner. So they got, either way we were, benefited. Both ways we were benefited. They got benefit from us and we also got. So we, those who were struggling with the technologies, the technological know-how, the world of technological know-how was open to the Indian industries. So I see this as a very good, on part of Indian economy, especially with the industries. And then that led to the lower prices of many goods, such as electronic prices. And this brought domestic as well as foreign investment in almost every sector opened to private sector. Okay. And, something which is very basic for all of us to understand is like, it was not that we already had something good with public sector and the government was doing very well and the productivity was very high and we were like very good. We were going on a very low note even before 1980s, and the problems that was associated with the industries was not less. So we were struggling. The only thing is the option was not available. So when we see right from 1948 till 1990, we would see that, the graph of growth in industries was, I would say, not that much. And the problem associated with the policies were big. Okay. Then, so there was no choice, I wanted to say. So it's not a choice that from good to good we are going, or it's like, it's nothing like we were very good and then now we were going for the option was simple, that we were bad and then we have to opt for something that was good. Okay. So the policies was followed by the special efforts to increase exports. So initially, the government policies had been protecting, we had to, protecting the industries of India, and the concept of, export oriented units was there, export processing zones were there, agri export zones were there. Then we all started with special economic zones, and lately national investment and manufacturing zones also emerged, and all these have benefited the export sector of our country. So we became what, we used to confine ourselves within the country before 1991, I would say. And then when the market got opened up, we got opportunity to move out and reach to the world, the world excellence, and compete with them. So it was all open up to explore more. All right. Then the next is, the limitation of, when we sum total all these in this policy in India till date, there are certain things till 1991 we need to think on. That is, there was, I already gave you that it was, the choice was not that we were already good and we were going to another good. It was not that we were excellent, we were going to another excellence. No, it was not like that. We were already bad. So let us see that what actually pushed us towards that. So industrial policies in India have, in those days it has failed, and the contribution to GDP had already stagnated, and the data show that it was 16% since 1991. The distortions in industrial pattern owing to selective inflow of investment was also there. And what was the distortions when we talk about in current phase of investment following liberalization? While substantial investment have been flowing into a few industries, there is a concern over slow pace of investment in many basic and strategic industries such as engineering, power, machine, tools, etc. Okay, so we see here that, though it has been good to good, but as I said before, it's time to see that have we reached what the expectation that we had after we switched on to 1991 industrial policy. Did we reach up to the expectation? So when we see that, still we are struggling with those certain issues, and then of course, the aim had since then, when we talk about, it's not that we had undergone with the change of philosophies. Let me tell you very frankly that the policies had been since then the same. Even when we talk about democratic socialism or socialism as such, or the equitable distribution of wealth, the aim is still, the philosophies behind is still the same. Let us see how much time does it take to reach to that philosophy. Since we are already a democratic country, so as a political science students, we need to understand these are some core things, some core philosophies that are the basis of the foundation of India as a country. So we feel like, there is long way to. Then there has been displacement of labor. So when you say displacement of labor, it is like restructuring and modernization of industries as a sequel to the new industrial policy that led to the displacement of labor. So when it was restructuring and modernization of industry, there was a displacement of labor. Okay. So then we see another limitation of industrial policy, that is absence of incentives for raising efficiency. Okay, let's see first what actually, when we say absence of incentives of raising efficiency, focusing on attention on internal liberalization without adequate emphasis on trade policy reforms resulted in the consumption-led growth rather than investment or export-led growth. So it was like the consumption was completely focused on, because since it is like open market and everybody wants the more growth in terms of capital, so the entire focus was on consumption. So that's what I said when I said the philosophies, are we leaving over the philosophies somewhere around and we are completely towards capitalist world, where it is survival of the fittest, or so when it comes to survival of the fittest, naturally the private sector will focus more on consumption, which is but natural for us to understand. But the aim should be like there has to be more investment so that there is growth, and also the export led growth would actually bring development in terms of industries in India. And then the vaguely defined industrial location policy. Okay, so what is that? That the new industrial policy, which emphasize the detrimental effects of the damage to environment, failed to define proper industrial location policy, which could ensure a pollution-free development of industry. So there's so much to talk about it, and I would just precisely tell you that now, since we had opened economy, they had opened the economy, much had been talked about environment and the damage of environment, the damage control for the environment, but least was done in this regard. Somewhere, as I told you, the first thing, coming back to that first slide, then we talked about that a sustainable development has always been the goal of the government, should be the goal of government. And here we find that we may talk big for 1991, but somewhere, by opening up all these areas, we find that in this area there is little stagnancy, where we are not able to justify to it. And then of course, Kyoto Protocol and all, you all know that it has been there, which talked about the 21 policies that has to be treated and all. But we find that the more has been contributed by the developed countries, and we have been criticizing them somewhere around the corner. I feel like India has also been a part of it, but thankfully that we still have controlled this thing, it's still under control, unlike the foreign countries, unlike the Western countries. we are not we are not actually contributing towards the damage of environment. So we see, but then the question mark is still there. Have we failed to define a proper industrial location, and is government taking that important steps that could actually lead to pollution free development of industrial climate? Okay, then we come to next, that is the limitation of what has been. So since we talk of 1991 policies, continuing with that, the limitation of these policies in India, the stagnation of manufacturing sector, which government initially wanted to. And what is that? That industrial policies in India and have failed to push the manufacturing sector, and we have been all this since, because we had a lag towards the technology and the technological development was actually more towards the West countries and the developed countries. So we looked on to them for giving us the manufacture. So we would actually, if you see the objective picture of it, India would prosper in industries only if it has its own manufacturing sector. And you see, when I compared India with China, there was the point was that China is the hub of manufacturing things. It has its own indigenous. So now when we say make in India, this is somewhere we had touched the core issue, that unless we start with the manufacturing sector, unless there is a boost in the manufacturing sector, the graph of industrial development, I would say, would come to stagnancy. And that's where we need to. So it's from objectively, if you see from 1992, I told you we have come a long way. But then if we are going to focus on these certain issues, we can do far better. Point is that I would say, as a person, I would tell you, we need to actually decide what should be the developmental goals. We have to ape the West. It is a different perspective altogether. Probably we'll see if we can talk it later. But yeah, if you talk about the Western developmental goals, so India have to be start its own manufacturing, and we need to give impetus to it. Then you see the distortions in industrial pattern owing to selective inflow of investment. In the current phase of investment, following the liberalization, while the substantial investment have been flowing into few industries, right? And there's concern over the slow pace of investment in many basic and strategic industries such as engineering, power, machine, tools, etc. So this has been a problem also. So we had a policy, industrial policy, that in 1991, after 1991, that the government had asked the large scale industries to invest in the small scale industries, so that the development is wholesome. So the large scale industries were coaxed to invest in small scale industries, so that the process of development of industries is wholesome. Okay, so we feel somewhere that the large scale industries were given lot of importance, and there was ease of regulations on them, so that they pick up, and of course they picked up also. But the small scale industries, because of the lack of capital and other resources, they were coming down and they could not help themselves. So we see there was a change, but still then the selective inflow of investment was more towards large scale industries. That is the reason I said that the government took this, that the large scale industry invest on the the small scale industries. Then there was, okay, yeah, this we had a talk. Yeah. Okay, this we had a talk. Okay. Just a second. So we come to the concluding part of it, that industrial policies in India have taken a shift from predominantly socialist pattern to capitalistic since 1991. I don't know if I can say that by philosophy we are still socialistic. And then there was a slight change, because since we were mixed economy, the option of getting, it has been easy for India to make that shift of philosophy from a socialist pattern to capitalistic, because we had always kept the option open. When we said mixed economy, that means it is inclusion of both. So then later on, from socialistic pattern we shifted to capitalistic pattern, giving the private sector importance so that they could open up and compete and then progress. And here also I would say, but the basis of socialism, where we talk about the equitable distribution of wealth, philosophically we still stand by it, because we all know, and that's how it is, that a country should, if it is prospering, it has to be the sum total. It has to be sum total of the economy. So whether you talk of primary sector, you talk of secondary sector, then you talk of tertiary sector, it has to be parallel, it has to be simultaneous. And India now has much liberalized industrial policy regime, focusing on increased foreign investment and lesser regulation, which I had already mentioned, because that was taken in the 1991 policy itself. Though we all started with more of regulation, but gradually we had to if you want more of investment, because once we have tasted that that there is more of development, if you open for the foreign investment, it would be better, so then it was quite obvious that we had to go for lesser regulation. Now when you talk of MNC companies, the laws and rules are quite different, and it is almost like you have it if you go abroad and work somewhere. The regulations are not that easy as it was for us in before 1991. Any government offices you would go, you can see that difference when you go to a private firm and when you go to a government firm. The productivity is less, the revenue coming as less, the profit is less. And if you go to the private sector, though the competition is more, there is a lot of stress for the people, those who work there. But if you sum total and if you find out equals to what is the result, you will see there is more of productivity, and the more the wages are, so that is also a part of it. So we see, there's it is increased foreign investment and lesser regulations are there, so that we invite more of foreign investment. Then India ranked 77th on World Bank doing business report 2018. Okay, and reforms related to insolvency resolution, that is Bankruptcy Insolvent Act 1970, and the goods and services taxes GST are impressive and will result in long-term gains for industrial sector. So I don't know actually, student, to tell you that whether we should go for drastically another jump or leap over for development, because I feel, because the very first slide that we talked about, it has to be gradual. I still stick onto it. If it is not, the hike should not be so drastic that it leaves no ground for other to replenish or something like that. So I would say, yeah, but then, yeah, if you conclude and if you come to the sum total, this is achievement after 1991. Then campaigns such as Make in India, because I told you this has been since 1991 a drawback, which we felt that it should be made, and that was stagnancy in the manufacturing sector, right? So Make in India and Startup India, this has been included. We will talk at length later, that in the next this thing, that this has given, of course, impetus, though it has not been able to full-fledgedly come, and the visible change we have not yet found when we talk about Make in India, because now, since it is a global market, we have to compete with the Chinese manufacturing units, and those who are much cheaper and things. You all know that it has been taken over. The only thing that we do is, like, instead of improving on manufacturing units, we request people not to buy so we see that something like Make in India and Startup India had to give more impetus if we want to come at par with the developmental goals that we have, and it will help to enhance the business ecosystem in the country. Then however, electricity shortages and high prices, credit constraints, okay, then high unit labor, this is the challenge for the private sector. Then high unit labor cost due to labor regulations. Okay, it's not that when we say there are the labor regulation has been lessened, but it's not that it's completely not there. That certain labor regulations, if you compare it with other countries, there is much more in India. Okay, so this also is a part of it, to give a judgment over it, whether it is good or not, is I would say would not be justified. But then, yeah, in Indian conditions, since we have come from a time from completely governmental, we have gone to privatization. So in that sense, some labor regulations has to be there. So it is, but then when these regulations are there, when MNC companies wants to invest, they see on these issues, and only then they invest. So if they find convenient, they would. And if in case these certain regulations, labor regulations, are not there, it would be more, I would say, more inviting for the MNC companies. Then political interference and other regulatory burdens continue to remain challenges for firm growth of industrial sector in India. And I don't know how to speak for it, because I feel that if you completely open it, then if there are no regulations, somewhere the labor laws or the labor class would actually suffer. But at the same time, if you want to compete with the materialism of the Western world that it provides, we have to completely undo with the socialistic pattern, I would say, completely undo with it. And and then that's what we say. But if you are focusing on the industrial development, you have to do away with all the political interference also. Then there is a need for a new industrial policy to boost the manufacturing sector of the country. And this is like 2018 it was felt. 2021, of course, when we take over, you will understand it more clearly, that there's some changes that has been brought. And how to see whether these changes would do good to is, we have to wait for a few more years, because when it shows slowly. Okay, so that is it. Coming back, give me 1 second. Children, so this gives you an idea. This gives you an idea about, you know, the basics of the industrial policy that, you know, India had since 1948. And, you know, I've tried to cover, like, if you sum total everything, the policies that we had in 1948, then 56, then 77, and all these policies have, I would not say that you can sum total from 1948 to 1991 as, you know, with little more, you know, every change that was there, it was like just you know, a small step towards improvement. It was not that drastic. So we were still dealing with a lot of problems with industrial growth. But what you need to focus is, like, from since 1991, the change that has been brought till 2021, and now what steps would government actually take to improve if in case there is any requirement of improvement, right?
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much. Ma'am, if you have time, can we take some questions?
Yes, yes.
So the floor is open for questions. Please feel free to ask. Any questions, any doubts, anything which you wish to ask?
Also that okay, meanwhile you can think also that I'm saying that I would be putting some questions, so that when you go through those questions, and I will be sharing this PPT also with Gaurika ma'am. She will be putting in the group, and then you can go through this PPT, read through it, and the questions that I'll be putting, you can, you know, you had to anyhow read that. So much of the confusions, if in case you have any, will be meted out there itself.
Any doubts, any clarifications? Ma'am, what should we do?
It was actually a run through, I know, because, you know, if you actually focus on these particular, like 1948 itself is like a one-day lecture, 1956 again it's a one-day lecture.
Absolutely.
So I tried to concise this so that we can next we can focus on the latest industrial policy, and, you know, we can find out, because you know, as policy planners, if tomorrow if you become a policy planner, what specific things you need to focus on is the major idea of, I would say, the lecture, my lecture would be. So if you come and sit in the seat of a policy planner, what changes would you like to, and through what perspective you should see, is my idea. So that is the reason, since, you know, I just run through, but you can, you know, again, there's a lot of material available, you can go through it. I try to concise it by just talking in 2-3 sentences, these major policies. Of course, if you get into it, it's much more deeper, and there's so much to know about it. It's yeah, it is. While I was preparing, it was a good experience for me too. I was also learning so many things, and it was wonderful preparing for it also. Yeah.
No, ma'am, you are very well, you know, concised and summarized the entire industrial policy, starting from the times of independence till now. So I think students, you know, they got an overview of what our industrial policy looks like.
Yeah.
And what were the major changes, you know, the paradigm shifts that were brought in, you know, in the industrial policy. So any doubts, any questions before we close? So ma'am, what do you suggest? Should we close now?
Yeah, if in case you come, when you go through the PPT, and if in case you come across it, I'm okay with it, you can put it in the group, or you can tell to Gaurika ma'am.
Or in the next class, ma'am, also they can ask.
Yeah.
Yes.
You can, next class also you can ask. Okay.
Yeah. So okay, Vaidehi, over to you.
On behalf of all present, I would now like to thank Dr. Deni Shahji for such a wonderful session and for lending us her precious time. I would also like to thank all the attendees for joining us today. We look forward to meeting you all in the following sessions. Once again, thank you.
Thank you very much, Vedai. Thank you, Deni ma'am.
Thank you, Gorika. God bless you all. Bye.
Bye, ma'am.